facing head-on the emotions beneath the surface as we bridge from an old world of confusion and lack to a beautiful new world of freedom, abundance, and love with straightforward truth and inspired hope is what you'll find on The Charla Anderson Show. Collector and connector of fascinating people. And everyone is fascinating. Here's your host, Charla Anderson.
Good, beautiful day, you beautiful, beautiful souls. This is Charla Anderson, host of The Charla Anderson Show, collector and connector of fascinating people, and everyone is fascinating, especially you. So grateful to have you join us here, and we're going to have an amazing show today. As you know, we're on Win-Win Women platform, which I dearly love, that whole family. We're on Podetize podcasts and live streaming on all those big streaming services, and we are continuing to grow and expand, and I'm so grateful to actually have I'll just say my book went bestseller last week, and I've had a lot of things happening and going on, and I've got a great amazing guest today, a friend of mine, Debby Montgomery Johnson, and we're going to talk about scamming and being relationship scammed and all kinds. Who knows where it goes with us, but certainly with me. But first, we're going to do a breathing exercise. Okay, so it's something I do every week. It helps ground me. It helps ground you, center us. It's a little mini vacation. So it's 22 seconds. We're going to breathe in calm. We're going to hold for 4 seconds. Breathe in calm for 7 seconds, hold for 4 seconds, and then breathe out gratitude for 11 seconds. And I want you to just join me as we do this. Here we go. Breathing in calm. Hold. Release. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Oh, works for me. I really, we need all that. And today, Debby Montgomery Johnson, who is one of my fun friends that we've met and actually met in person. A lot of people, we've met a couple of years ago and got to meet your grandkids and all that kind of stuff. It was so much fun. And we are going to be talking about the women behind the smile, her book, all of these things that she is amazing at. And she's a #1 best-selling author, speaker, entrepreneur, podcast host, and a woman on a mission. So Debby, I would love it if you would just kind of tell us a little bit about who you are and a little bit about what you are up to these days. Let's get this party started.
Absolutely. Thank you so much. Congratulations on your book. I remember when I was out there and we were out swimming in the pool with the kids, you gave me a copy of it, and it is great. And it is, the candy bar hugs, and I love candy. I love hugs. So congratulations on that front. Who am I? I like to say that I'm just like you, just like any other mom, woman out there. I'm a mother of 4, grandmother of 4, daughter. My mom and dad are 94 and 88, and they live nearby me. So a lot of my life is filled up with that. Sometimes I feel like I'm the fluff or the icing in a Oreo cookie. I got the parents on one side and the kids on the other and the grandkids. So I'm very busy. I became an entrepreneur 13 years ago when my husband passed away suddenly. And that was something that, obviously hadn't planned on. He had been big guy, had diabetes, which we thought was under control, but he walked out the door one day and the next day he was dead. And that's something that none of us can really anticipate. You try to plan for it, but even that, my kids were 15 to 23 and none of us anticipated that. So that was the first big change in my life, which kind of threw me into why you and I are really here on the Women Behind the Smile. Because after Lou died, it took me about 6 months of running on energy and anxiety and learning. I had to run his company, which I knew nothing about. And so from one day to the next, I was thrown into running his business, which it's interesting. I still call it his business. And I've had the company 13 years. We've been in business 20. So it's my company, vitamin supplement company for neuropathy called benfocomplete.com. I want to put it out there. It's an excellent thing.
Spell that.
BenfoComplete.com. Benfo Complete. Benfotiamine is a form of vitamin B1. It's a lipid soluble fat form of vitamin B1, which originally was for alcoholic neuritis, inflammation of the nerves due to excessive alcoholism or alcohol drinking. And it's funny because you're in Dallas. A lot of my Texas clients who imbibe are funny because they're like, hey, we're taking this stuff for neuropathy, which is nerve ending damage, typically for diabetics. And they're like, we can't get as drunk as we used to. it kind of, blows up the sugar content of things. And so because I didn't know anything about Lou's company and it paid the bills, I was a treasurer at a school district at that point, working for benefits. I had to learn very, very quickly how to run the business. And as an entrepreneur, that's a whole nother story, is how do you run a company that wasn't yours? How do you learn how to do it and work with customers? I was really good with the customers, but there was a lot of it that I didn't know how to do and I had to learn. Hence, there's no I in team. I had to get a team and learn how to work with people and have them help me with marketing and sales and production and all these things. And all my years of working were, I was a paralegal for years when I got out of college. I worked for a bank. I was a banker for 8.5 years. I was an Air Force Intelligence Officer for 8 years. I was a stay-at-home mom for 11, 12 years. I had a lot of experience, which helped with running Lou's company. And it also prepared me, we talk about financial scams and financial fraud. Going into it, if you looked at my background, you would have figured there's no way she's going to get taken by something like this.
An intelligence officer for the Pentagon and Air Force. So
exactly. Yeah. I worked at the Pentagon. I worked at, overseas in Europe, and I worked for Defense Intelligence Agency. I had a lot of really good experience. And, I worked as a senior branch manager for a bank down here for a lot of years. So I had great experience, but I like to say too, that anybody and everybody can be taken by somebody and will at some point in their life. And because when I first started talking as the woman behind the smile, I'd have people saying, well, I'm never going to get taken. That's never going to happen to me. I said, never say never. I hope it certainly doesn't. But in this particular case with after the pandemic, the rise of scams is astronomical, and it's affecting everybody because we're all home. We're all on the computers. We're all relying and trusting on who we see on the screen. I know who you are because we've met in person, but think about all those Zoom calls we're on. You probably never met 3/4 of the people that are behind the screen. We're relying on what we see, and we can't do that, especially with artificial intelligence coming out. What we know how to do, the scammers are so far ahead of us. And I don't even want to call them scammers because that kind of trivializes what they do. They are criminals.
Criminals.
Organized crime in a big, big way. Trillions of dollars are taken by unsuspecting, trusting people around the world by criminals. And they take all that money that the ill-gotten gain, and they are so far ahead of us technology-wise and can, that whole black dark web. I read something this morning about AI and I forget what it was called, but it's obviously not chat. It's the underground version of the chat AI. And they're using it to just get everybody. So to bring this back around, why I'm doing what I'm doing now as an advocate is because of what came out of my life after Lou died. And I want all my single lady friends, divorced, widowed, whatever, to hear this, because I wasn't looking necessarily for love. I wasn't desperate. I was really busy. I was looking for a friend. I was looking for someone to talk to. Here I was at home all alone all of a sudden. And my youngest son was 15, so he was out of the house. And I kept thinking, okay, so his job is to go to school. His job is to do his very best. My job is to learn how to run the company and do this stuff. And I was also working my second job. So of the 12 hours of being awake, I like to say out of those 24 hours of being awake, I slept about 4, because I would go to sleep at midnight alone in my big king size bed and just cry. I was sad. I was so angry at Lou for dying. How do you get angry at someone for dying? But it was so unplanned. And, one day he was alive and doing fairly well. And the next day, poof, he was gone. And it happens more than we care to think about. And I think the average age of a widow is like 52, 53, 54 years old. And we don't talk about that. We don't plan on that. And so my girlfriends were all, Dad, you got to get a life. You got to do something other than work. And I was like, okay, I've been married for almost 26 years. I hadn't dated since I was in my 20s. And all those, because their idea of getting a life was going out, getting a date, moving on with life. And as soon as they would say that, the anxiety just erupted. I'm not pretty enough, smart enough, skinny enough, all these not enoughs that we go through when we're 16 popped out at 52. And then I was scolding myself, going, you've had all these career things, you've got raised 4 children, you've got great, all this stuff is good. Stop thinking that you're not enough. And so I jumped in, sort of dipped my toe, but I jumped in and went to a safe, or I thought it was a safe, faith-based dating site. Because I had a lot of friends that had gone on to online dating and it worked out for them. I even went to my mother and I felt like, oh my gosh, mom's the biggest skeptic. And I addressed it with her first. And she said, oh, my best friend who's in her 80s met her husband on online dating, And I'm thinking, okay, if those mom's behind us, let's just go for it. So I did and jumped in. International businessman from London, widower, had a son, was international in business. He had a company, or he worked with a company he was actually transporting hardwood trees. And I had investments in hardwood trees down in Costa Rica. He didn't know that, but as I was trying to research him, I saw that. And so I said, this is kind of fun that we can talk about these things. Well, one thing led to another. And he was in Houston at the time, but then got a job offer to go overseas, and it took him overseas. And this was back in 2010, 2012. And the way we communicated off the dating site, there's a big red flag, don't go off the dating site, is we went to Yahoo Chat, which today would be Google Hangouts or Facebook Messenger or something like that. But back then it was Yahoo Chat, and that was like a instant messaging. It was amazing. And I could do it wherever he was in the world. And we would be online. We talked a couple of times because people are like, well, how do you know who he was? And I said, well, I talked to him on the phone a couple of times and I heard a British accent, which bought into the story. He was from London. And I wrote all hours of the day, all hours of the night, and I look back, we both like to write. I have 4,000 pages of journal, which I've printed in 5 volumes, thinking that I was going to have family history to show my kids how he and I met. Turned out to be 4,000 pages of evidence, which nobody could use. So fast forward after these 2 years where I didn't just arbitrarily, lose $1 million and give him all this stuff. We had sort of a business thing going. I would talk about his business. He would talk about mine. We would work out different things. I remember one time he asked me to help him with a business plan. And I sat for hours figuring out, business plan for him. So for us, it was more of a business deal. Like, can you help me with ABC? And I know in business, sometimes you don't get paid until the job's done. And so part of that bought into, I was helping him out with his business, helping him out with things that were happening with customs and whatever overseas. And yeah, we had a lot of emotional ups and downs. And so there are a lot of red flags I can tell you about now, which I think is more important than my story, because millions of people are being taken by scammers, by criminals every year. And the stories are very similar. So my story is 1,000 other women's stories. They just change the names and they change, some of the things that happen to them. But the bottom line is that they're all fabricated, and they are looking for really good-hearted people who might happen to have had something happen in their lives. They're looking for widows, divorcees, someone that might have had an emotional, it's trauma, actually. You may not think so. I never thought I was vulnerable, but I was. And I wasn't stupid. I wasn't to blame, but I was, for them, easy prey. And that's the thing. There's a psychology of the scam, and it's very calculated. And what took 2 years for me is now happening in 2 or 3 months. They've upped their game. And, I maybe did wire transfers or Western Union back then. Today, it's cryptocurrency. And it's a really strange thing they call it. It's called pig butchering. And that came out of China, where you kind of fatten up the pig and then you slaughter it. But they come at you in financial planning where, hey, my friend is teaching cryptocurrency. I'm invested in cryptocurrency, and I really like for you to learn how to do it. You want to try it. And so it's hitting millennials and the younger folks in a big way, because they've grown up online thinking that they're safe, that they know everything. And the websites that are designed are just amazing. They look like financial companies. They get you to invest a little bit. They'll show a little bit of a gain. They'll show a statement. They'll get you to invest more. And then all of a sudden you're out $100,000, $200,000, $300,000 because they just disappear because none of it's real. And the pictures for folks our age, be really careful. Do not have your Facebook and your social media profiles public unless you're an author like we are, because they'll take pictures. They create profiles off of people's family pictures. They love having babies. They love having, children, grandchildren. I never put pictures of my grandchildren up because they create a family. And so when I was looking to go online, I looked for a man that had a son, had a family, had a dog, had a sister. All those pictures are created from stealing them, stolen identity from other people. You and I have talked about the military. It happens a lot with military. So if you've got someone that's reached out to you and they're in a uniform, it is probably a fake. It's probably a scammer because they will not do that. They will not ask you to send money to get them home from Syria. They will not ask you to, buy a phone for them. They just won't. But they show up in uniform and people inherently trust and love somebody in a uniform. I do. I was in uniform for all those years. I have family, kids that are in uniform, but the scammers know, those criminals know what's going to pull at the heartstrings of the people they can get.
My sister had a saying, or has a saying, years and years and years ago. She said, con men have only themselves to sell and they're masters at it. And so talking about the stuff that they're doing now, I get it almost anytime I post anything. And it's like, this was on Facebook and I copied and pasted it. It says, I always enjoy what you share here on Facebook, but we're not friends yet. I've tried several times to send you a friend request, but it's not going through. I'll be glad if you can just click into my profile and send me a friend request. If you find the message embarrassing, please pardon my manners. Thank you. My response to that now, when I get those, I'm like,
delete, block is what it should be.
Well, actually, I answer them sometimes and say, con men, I've gotten so sophisticated, and be a good person, do the right thing. Karma is real. I'll say something along that line. And this one guy, this last one said, how dare you call me a con man? And I was like, well, defensiveness is a key. Yeah. So anyway,
the big lesson there, though, is that we don't need thousands and thousands of friends and followers because only 10 or 15 are going to see what we're writing anyway. And anybody that sends you an unsolicited friend request is not your friend. And be careful about women's groups and things that you're involved in, because it only takes one or two of them to get into a group, and they pretend to be a woman, and now they've become a mutual friend, and so that drops our trust. I mean, it drops our scrutiny of them, thinking, oh, well, I can trust them because they're mutual friends.
I just saw that today. Very good friends of mine are two mutual friends of somebody, and I went to send a friend request, and I went to his profile, and it's what you were just describing, puppies and cutes and birds and things. And I want to ask those two mutual friends, they're both out of the country actually, if they are really friends with this person, or did they just happen to to accept a friend request, because that's called, then you've got a common friend and you trust the friend. And so I'm very, very, very aware of a lot of that, probably more than most people. Yeah. And did you know, and there was a girl that was panhandling down in Fort Worth a few years ago, and I talked to her for quite some time, and I found out, she didn't tell me this, but there's a panhandler school in Houston, I believe. And they teach these people how to go and how to create these amazing stories. And my brother just, can't come pick me up, and I'm stranded here. Could you give me $5 for the bus? And we want to give them.
In Nigeria, they actually have universities that they're training these guys. And so they are very well trained. And if you think about it, we went offshore all these years ago, off site, and did call centers in India, in Africa. And all those folks who are college educated have become the best sales guys. And if they could only do what they do for bad, if they could do that for the good, they'd be phenomenal, just phenomenal.
It's like, isn't that the truth? Why your guy, he ultimately fell in love with you, right? I mean,
that's part of the story. I think part of it might have been I affected him enough that he actually came online and confessed. And back then, even today, very few of them are going to come and confess. They might, but it's part of the story. Then they try to get you, because when he confessed and came online and I saw him, it was the first time in 2 years that I actually saw his face. It wasn't my handsome Brit. It was a young Nigerian man. So I used to say dark hair, dark skin, dark eyes, young guy. But he's part of a group. It's never a he, it is they. It might start off as one guy, but you'll see, I bet I could go through my 4,000 pages and find at which point it was somebody else. I always thought that perhaps over the years, my life affected his enough that he couldn't do it anymore. Now, Dr. Tim McGinnis, I'm on the board of directors at SCARS, which is the Society of Citizens Against Relationship Scams. Tim would say, Deb, that's part of the scam because they know that they've bled you dry and they want to have you continue. Because this fella at the time, his name was Eric, he said, can we keep this going? And I'm thinking, are you out of your mind? You've taken $1 million from me. I had no more money to give to him. But what they do now is, when they get all of your money, they want you to help them. So can you help me with such and such? Again, you're not thinking this is a scammer. I did at that point because he confessed. But the women that I work with now that become, we call money mules or package mules, they're the ones that will go and open up a PO box so that this person can receive mail, or they will receive checks themselves and put it in their bank accounts and then go and, send crypto Bitcoin back to them. And what's happening there is that now there's a layer between the actual criminal and the new victim, and that's you. And it's very easy because you're here in the United States, for the federal government, Justice Department, to come after you as a criminal. And we've got 67-year-old women being arrested and prosecuted for being money mules because they've facilitated the movement of money or of property. So sad. And not everybody's going to get arrested, obviously, but when you have the police or FBI come to you and say, this is a scam that they have you participating in, you must stop, and you don't, and it happens over and over and over, well, you're going to jail. And that's what's happened because the criminals are so good at this art of the scam, the psychology, and we call it the amygdala hijack. That amygdala is so hijacked, and I used to say that my heart ruled my head. It does. The brain chemistry changes, and I want to say that you're not at fault for what happened because they are so expert at manipulating you to believe their stories. So here's the thing, I want people to understand is that if you're going to go into games with Words with Friends, gaming on sites, it's not just dating sites, it's anything you were engaged in on social media. It could be LinkedIn, Facebook friends, all those things. If someone is coming at you and is actively trying to become your friend, and I've got women that have been on Words with Friends. They started a game with someone, and after a little bit, you feel comfortable with that person that you're playing with, and then something happens. Child's had an accident or something has happened, and they're like, "Hey, can you help me out?" We all want to say, "Sure." And as soon as we do that, they gotcha. So remember, we don't know these people online. We don't know who they are. Do not send things. Do not send phones. Do not send, the credit card information. You don't have to send them a gift card anymore. You just have to give them the numbers, and then they're laughing their way to the bank. Do not send money. Do not wire money. Do not buy cryptocurrency from a financial investment guy that you have not met in person. If you've never seen them, they are not your friend. You think they are, because they can actually do video chats and everything. And I think about Netflix and what we've been doing the last couple of years. And my husband and I watch a lot of shows from overseas. I know that they're not speaking English. I hear English, but they're speaking Dutch or Finnish or something. But my brain is saying, I know what they're saying. And they're not. They're not saying what I think that they're saying. They might be saying it, but in a different language. So I'm looking at this guy, goes, he's speaking English. He's talking to me. He's not, And with this AI, oh my goodness, that has opened up a can of worms that we can't trust anything right now. So my tagline now is beware and be aware. They are out there to get you. It is their job to get your money, and your heart happens to come with it. And that's the hardest thing to heal, is the ripping out of your heart and the trust that you had in somebody. For me to trust somebody after that was very difficult, until I met my now husband. And when he and I met, bless his heart, he told me something about him that his friends said, don't tell her, it'll scare her off. And when he told me it was nothing bad, I said, you know what? You're the first man to not lie to me in 2 years. That was huge for me. So remember,
So
anybody
the shame. So the shame is a huge piece of it, because you didn't tell anybody for a while, did you?
No, I didn't. And that's interesting. Tim and I were talking about shame and guilt. I felt guilty when I realized the scam. I felt stupid. And that's the word that a lot of people say, but I wasn't. I'm not a stupid person. And I don't want anybody that is listening out there that knows someone that has gone through this to go at them and say, well, that was stupid of you, because it wasn't. It was expert manipulation and grooming is what they call it. Yeah, I was susceptible. The only thing I did wrong was say hello. And that was the very beginning. As soon as you say hello, they've got you. Don't let them. Okay. We don't need that engagement. If you want to meet somebody, go to church, go to, something close by.
Go to the library. There's so much, they have a lot of activities at the library. I'm taking my toddler, grand toddler, and find whatever you're interested in, go do that. And then somebody who's interested in that, you'll eventually.
And make sure they're local. If you haven't seen them within 2 weeks, I used to say, if you haven't seen the whites of their eyes, but with all this, video crap going on, if you haven't seen them in person within 2 weeks, it's going to be a scam. Don't trust that. Well, I can't get there because A, B, C, and D, they've got 4,000 pages of excuses on why they're not going to get to you. And if they're a doctor in the UN over in Iraq, they're not coming home to you. If there's somebody out there doing good and they need my help. No, they don't need your help, because they don't need $1 million from one person. They need $250 from 1 million people, and they're getting it. They're getting it. I heard of a scam the other day where a fella had been contacted by someone he thought was his friend. He said, hey, my daughter can't do such and such. Can you help her? Give her $100 on an Amazon gift card, because she needs such and such. And he did. And the guy came back and said, well, it wasn't enough. Would you mind doing another $600 later? He realized that he had just been taken. And it happens to the best of people. Doesn't matter how old you are, how intelligent you are, how well-schooled you are. Everybody can be taken by somebody. And 60% of the time, it's somebody that you know. And
another one that I've heard, somebody you know or kind of know or feel.
Well, and that's the thing about the whole process of the scam, is that you become family. They become a friend. They become a trusted companion. They become somebody that's close to you.
A confidant.
And you're willing to say to Western Union, when they say, hey, do you know this person? Of course, it's my boyfriend. So now you're lying, because you're so engaged in this thing. Tim and I are working with the banking world now, trying to come up with best practices for bankers. Former banker, right? I used to feel like the fraud department was pretty strict until it happened to me. And I went to them, I said, if anybody had looked at my history, they would have seen I'd never done a wire transfer in the 50 years I'd been alive. And all of a sudden, wire. Where were they? Because when I went to them later, they're like, not our problem. Today, it is going to be their problem, because they're going to make the banks and other industries like that financially responsible for some of this stuff if they can't slow you down. And that's the only thing. Just pause. If it seems to be too good, just step aside. Like your grandma used to say, sleep on it. Get a trusted friend. I like a dating buddy or a gaming buddy, someone that's a little more objective, because the scammers want to isolate you from your friends and your family. And once they do that, all you're hearing is their voice. Don't listen to them. Don't listen. They're going to tell you not to do this. Well, of course they are going to tell you not to do it, because, an outsider might see this a little differently. So or
at least have you ask a different question. So I just heard, or not heard just, but I've recently been reminded that phone calls a lot of times will say, can you hear me? And the minute you say yes, then they've recorded you saying yes. And so a friend of mine just said, I said, why are you asking? No, she said, she answered it in a way that she never said yes. And he finally hung up on her.
Well, they want your voice too, because the whole grandmother scam, they're creating scamming messages using our voice can be duplicated, and so they can make a whole thing up using my voice and it sounds like me, or you've seen the pictures of Tom Cruise or whatever. It's not really him, but they've duplicated that. So you can't trust anything right now. And that's unfortunate because we want to be trusting people, but just be careful. Take an extra step before you jump on it.
Yeah. So skeptical, discerning is probably a good word. Let's be discerning before we, get into something. And one of my friends is her mom's, every time she gets a new credit card, it's compromised the first time she uses it. I'm not sure what's going on with that, but there's obviously somebody has something. And
they might I had a friend call up one day and she goes, Deb, and she knows my story. She said, I have this older neighbor and she called me up and she asked me to come over and help her take a picture of her credit card because she had to send it to a friend. I'm like, oh no, stop. Don't do that. Well, it turns out she didn't have to send the credit card to the friend. All she had to do is give the person the numbers on the back. And then when we tried to get a hold of the bank and said, hey, there's possible fraud here, they didn't want to hear about it because we weren't on the card. So, anybody that's older, and I was out in Dallas for a federal court case when this happened. And anybody over 60, this is considered elder fraud. And it's a big darn deal. And I was very proud of the judge and the prosecutors and everybody in the federal court in Dallas because they added years to the sentence this young man was given because it was elder fraud. But it's amazing how, it doesn't matter how old you are. You can be taken. You can have a minute. I mean, I was on Facebook and I've been doing this for a lot of years. And I was on Facebook doing something, getting some Christmas travel set up for a family. And one of my friends came online and said, hey, I'm having a hard time getting my Facebook account up. Would you mind helping me out? And I'm totally distracted, right? And I said, sure, not a problem. She's local. So said, you're going to get this email, blah, blah, blah. So I followed the directions because I wasn't paying attention. Well, next thing I know, they had my account, changed the password, got me off of it. I was so mad because for me to re-engage as me was forever. I couldn't get Facebook to listen to me, and I couldn't upload my own ID information. And so it came in a minute of distraction. And that's what they bank on. It's like fishing. They're all out there, throw out the net. We only need a couple.
Integrity I don't understand it. Karma is real. And here we are, the vast majority of the people you and I know and that we deal with and know and love, we're just trying to get along and do the best we can and make a difference. And this underground world of evil people that, one guy I did that same message to and say, do the right thing. Karma is real kind of a thing.
Yeah.
And he came back and he said, you have no idea. I've been sleeping on a floor. It's the only thing I have he explained
that's part of the
situation.
That's part of the con.
And I didn't end up responding, but it sounded like he was like, hey, I don't have any other options.
That's the excuse where they try to reel you in and say, I'm this poor kid living in Lagos or whatever. The way they're getting arrested over there is not, the way we would normally get arrested. It's by things that we're sending to the EFCC, which is the financial folks over there. Go to this neighborhood, look at the car, because there could be a picture of a car. This is not the car that belongs to a kid that's not making any money. Might be living in what we would consider, a ghetto type of a thing. But they go up there, they've got cash, they've got gold, they've got, you name it, And what they do here too is that they'll set up what looks like a legitimate business where they're getting, this is the crazy part, they'll be getting checks and things in from victims. Then they'll go and they'll buy a used car and they'll have that car shipped overseas. Well, now that car gets over there and then that car gets sold. Well, now you've put so many layers between the victim and that, it's money laundering. And so by the time it gets sold over in Nigeria or Ghana, wherever, that now they say they have legitimate money, but if they go and they spend that, it's beyond what their means should be. And it's easy money for them. So yeah, I'm poor, I can't do such and such. I've got a friend, a woman over in Nigeria whose mother was scammed. This is a Nigerian woman whose mom was scammed. She started an organization over there, a cybersecurity company, because it's made her so angry that the reputation of the country is based on what the scammers and the criminals are doing. And she's like, Deb, it's like calling Americans all cowboys. We're not all cowboys, but not all Nigerians are scammers. But the ones that are doing it are very effective. The problem is 3 out of 100 victims are going to report it. So you hear these humongous numbers from the FTC and whatever about there's billions of dollars, trillions of dollars being taken. Multiply that by another, 90, because victims feel embarrassed. They feel vulnerable. They get shamed and blamed by family members and by friends, and they shut down and they don't want to tell. And that's why the scammers are laughing their way to the bank, because they know people are not going to tell. And that's why I started speaking up, because I got tired of that. I don't want to hear the story of the poor boy over there, because someone got $1 million and it wasn't him, but the organizations are using that money to fund terrorism, to fund, trafficking, to fund all these awful things. I would never have contributed to that, obviously, but that's what's happening. And we don't need to feel sorry for any one of them.
Well, my show is about hope, right? So yes, there is hope that we have, getting the word out a little bit more and having a, knowing that it being wise and discerning and not so gullible and just asking a few more questions.
Gullible.
Yeah.
It's not gullible, but just be aware that human nature is such that we want to help people, and we do. And sometimes that's for the good, and sometimes it gets us in trouble. And so what I want people to know, that there is hope, especially if you've become a victim to this. You're going to want to shut down and not tell anybody. Can't do that. You'll never recover emotionally. You'll hardly ever recover financially. But what's more important is that you can't take the money with you. But I don't want someone committing suicide over something like this. And that's happening every single day, because someone has lost hope. They've lost their friends. They've lost their financial security. If you're 60, 65, 70 years old and you've lost all of your financial wherewithal, where do you go? You don't want to call your kids and say, I have to come live with you, because that's embarrassing. You can't call your friends, because they're going to say, well, that was really dumb of you. There is hope. And that's why the organization that I work with, SCARS, it's the Society of Citizens Against Relationship Scams. We are the one and only, I think, organization that really supports the victims, that supports them with support groups and gets them, to go to a trauma therapist, because there's so much you can do. You don't think you can, but in time, there is light at the end of that tunnel. There is hope that you will believe and come to believe that you were not at fault. It was not your fault that you got taken. You just happened to be there. You happened to say yes, but there are steps to recover. There are steps to report. Because we're even working with law enforcement, because originally, you walk into a police department to file a report and they laugh you out the door. That's not what they do to victims of domestic violence anymore, So there's a learning curve here. And we want people to know that there are steps to take. There are steps to report. There, with cryptocurrency, there may be even a step to get some of the money back. But the biggest thing is to raise awareness, that make your social media private. You don't have to have the world as your audience. And if somebody asks for money, no is the answer. Even family members made me very leery about giving money to anybody, say,
well, and they may be, asking it because they're involved in that,
never know.
You never know.
People want things for free. They want things for doing nothing. They feel that they're entitled to it. And that's what they'll tell you too. Well, those wealthy Americans, those wealthy whoever's, we're not all wealthy. If I could have given that money to my grandchildren or great grandchildren, how about it? If he had asked me to help out and it was legit, I would have done it. Not as big as I did, but we're not bad people. We do want everybody to be happy, but in a healthy, trustworthy way. Don't lie to me to get something from me, because you will never be my friend then. So
no, we
got to have hope. There are good people out there, and find good people and surround yourself with them. But online,
our community is where we really I believe we've I know I have stayed home a lot, and not as many in-person things. Now, you certainly can get scammed in person as well, but generally speaking, if you're out there helping a community service, you're out there in your community and volunteering or doing a garden or whatever, if you're outside and not always on your screens, you might really find some good friends, right? I mean, don't you? I feel
Absolutely.
like I have a lot of friends, but that's what we're looking for, companionship sometimes. And so that's, I
We
guess, where
need
the
we
risk
need community.
comes.
We need our tribe, and our tribe doesn't have to be 100,000 people. We need a family of 2, 3, 4, 6, 10.
Well, yeah, Bob Bodine has, the 12. Jesus had 12, there's a 12, and
Exactly.
you have your one, you have your three, and then you have your the rest that are all in this community. It's a wonderful The
Right.
Power of Who is his book, The Power of Who. It's an amazing book.
Which is tough, especially when you're dealing with kids, because other than the older woman, that's got the demographics, we're looking at teenagers because they're looking to find friends. They feel trusted online. They could be putting a picture out there saying, I'm playing lacrosse at 3 o'clock at Park Vista High School. Well, all the predators are out there. Now they know what you look like, where you are, what time you're going to be there. And it's not too difficult to extrapolate that, we're going to have kids taken. And parents are thinking, well, I want my kids to have a phone. We're talking 10, 11-year-olds, because I want them to contact me. Well, do you know what your kids are doing on those phones? Do you know what information? Do you know who they're talking to? And we
Even if
don't.
they've been warned and they think they're sophisticated enough to figure it out.
And the kids aren't. And
Trafficking is real, and
it
it's
is. And
horrifically.
it's Michael Butler's got an organization that works with that. We put people around ourselves that have good causes. And the reason these causes are out there is because there is a problem. That's why SCARS is around. That's why Michael's thing is around. That's why you're doing what you're doing, is that there are problems out there. And some of us have learned to speak up. I say stand up and speak up. You have to learn from what happened to you and not let it happen again. And that's the learning part, is what happened? Why did it happen? How can I not let it happen again? And who can I help move forward? Because there's someone sitting beside you that has had the same thing happen to them, and they are desperate to know that they're not alone.
And yes,
And that's what we need to do.
How do people find SCARS, but how do they find SCARS? How do they find Debby Montgomery Johnson? How do we get you
Okay.
your word out
I have a
there?
website called thewomanbehindthesmile.com. I do work with SCARS, and the best way to find, I call it the encyclopedia of everything you and your family want to know about relationship scams, is romancescamsnow.com. And that will lead you to, if you've been a victim, to report it at againstscam.com, againstscam.org. Romance Scams Now is the place to go for that. Debby at The Woman Behind the Smile is how they can write to me. And it's Debby with a Y, Debby at thewomanbehindthesmile.com. I do not want to entertain scammers, but if there is a victim out there or a family member that doesn't know what to do, I will write back to you individually. But The Woman Behind the Smile is where I've got a lot of videos, and I had my podcast there. I'm not doing that right now, but I am active with the SCARS victim support groups, and just out there ready to help.
And you do, and you've got a strong stand now. I know, I remember the original story where you kind of hinted at a women's group, that Women's Prosperity Network, right? That had happened. So you were encouraged to stand up and speak up.
I was in a place where I felt comfortable and safe around women that understood. They might not have had it happen to them, but it might have happened to their mother, to a good friend. I always say it could happen to your daughter, it could happen to your father. And my mom and dad in 88 and 94, I was like, guys, don't answer the phone. If you see that it's unavailable, you don't need to say hi. It's not your friend. And if it is, they'll leave a message. We've got to just make people aware, and watch out for our neighbors. If you have an older neighbor out there and you haven't seen them in a while, or you say, how you doing? Or if you have a friend that's online dating and they stop talking to you about it, there could be a problem there, and they don't want to tell you what they're doing. Happened to me. I didn't want to tell my best friend what was going on, and almost lost her because of that, because she tried to push, and I was like, don't push me on this one. And if you get so far in that at some point you just can't recover, it's like you're chasing the money. You just like one more, because if I get out now, I've lost so much. Well, guess what? You're going to be in it until you're broken. So if you don't stop in the first 2 weeks, you're going to be stuck. And that's when you come to us at SCARS. And it's unfortunate, but we get new people every day. And that makes me sad, because you'd think after all these years we'd do a better job. But people don't want to hear don't. I didn't, but just beware and be aware.
Beware and be aware. That's your
My tag.
quote. Your tag. Yes.
Okay.
So you have what's next for you? Any more books? Any more shows?
Well, I wrote a book called Brain Cramp, Fearless. It was called Fearless. I write every month for a magazine, an online magazine called Positive Tribe, and that's at positivetribe.com. I love doing that because I'm looking at a picture of my dad outside on a tree. I use my parents and the, many, many decades of experiences that they've had. And I really am very blessed that they're nearby, because I spend a lot of time with them. And so I write a lot for that. I write and I do support groups for scars. I backed off a little bit just because I've got a lot of family issues going on with one of my youngest sons. But I realized too that we have so many things happening in our lives that we feel like, oh, we can't talk to anybody about. It gets overwhelming. If there's mental health issues out there, there are physical issues, physical diseases and disorders. And so many people are afraid to speak up because they're afraid of being judged. And I was like, you know what? So they judge me. My husband always says, what people think about you doesn't matter. It's true. What you think of me doesn't matter. What I think of me matters. What God thinks of me matters. And what can I do best? And then I learned something new. I was working with one of my son's therapists, and she said, don't do for him what he can do for himself. A mom is an enabler. And I know I enabled the scam to go on for so long because I wanted to help, do things for yourself that make you feel better. Find self-care. We can't do everything for everybody else because they may want our anxiety level as high as theirs because it makes them feel comfortable. Just stop and take a breath. I love how you started the show by breathing. Just breathe, drink some water, especially now with the heat that we're going through. And
drink water, touch, step outside, or actually even holding a rock or something that is grounding, because we're always with shoes, we're always with, carpet, things that are artificial. And breathing is the breath of life, the I am coming into you. So every word, so take that moment anytime you're in a stressful situation or just need to come any vacation, just breathe in.
And don't feel guilty. Don't beat yourself up because of a misstep in the past. It's, we all
can't change anything that just happened.
And that mistake might have been something that really, in this whole eternal perspective, it was something that maybe had to happen. So yeah, it's bad. Bad things do happen to good people, but
we can't change it, but we can change our story about it. And that's something that another whole conversation, but you can change your story about what happened and you can move forward. You can't change that, but if you don't like where you are, you've got the next step you have control over. The next word, the next step, you can take a different path and begin a different journey if you choose. And it's choice. It's all choice, right?
And it's fail forward fast.
Do it faster. Absolutely.
Just get it over with and learn from it.
So. Well, it's been amazing having you with us today on the Charla Anderson Show, and I'm so grateful for your friendship and your light in the world and the difference you're making. That's what I think we're all here for. And when we do get involved in something, it's because we have a heart to help and make a difference to somebody else. Maybe we need to bring it a little closer to home and find somebody local that could use that more than somebody in another foreign world. So
absolutely.
Yeah. So I love you and I'm grateful for your friendship. And I'm so grateful for this platform. I love this Win-Win Women platform and globally getting the word out to so many women around the world. The goal for this platform is to have access 24/7 in every language for 3.9 billion women. And that's a big goal. And that's a stated goal. And that's where we're headed. So, I'm privileged and honored to be here. And thank you for listening. Anyone who's out there listening, if you want to reach out to me, charlaanderson.com. I'd love to hear from you. So as I tend to end most of my shows is I want you to be blessed. I want you to feel blessed. And I'm going to just say, always, always, always choose joy.
Parting is such sweet sorrow. The Charla Anderson Show. Encouraging you to stand strong and courageous with bold faith, no fear, immense hope, kindness, and love, especially towards yourself. Visit charlaanderson.com for replays, blogs, and more on her ever-expanding website, as well as watch her live TV show on winwinwomen.tv, Roku, Apple TV, and Amazon Fire. And so that we can continue learning together and growing this community of beautiful souls, we invite you to share the Charla Anderson Show with your circle of friends. Until we meet again next week, remember always, choose joy.